Peter Grimwade. Was he in
I-
that season? Was he in season 19?
I can't tell if you're joking because there's gaps in your knowledge.
I believe he was a director, wasn't he, in this particular season?
And
I don't know. And what?
you wrote Time Flight, you knob.
Oh, did he? Well, that's how much notice I paid a Time Flight.
That's the bit that's going at the beginning of the episode.
Hi everyone, welcome to our Talking About Who for season 19, which I believe should be dropping through a few letterboxes this week on Blu-ray. I'm Paul, or P-Bal, and here to share my contrary views, I've got...
Hi, it's James.
And hi, it's Jason. Good to see you.
Well, this is a long season. We will be taking a break halfway through. Second part will be on the day after, obviously, or if this is in the future, it'll be straight away. How magical is that? Write your comments below. I feel the love. It warms my heart. And we'll kick off with Castrovalva. So who wants to start on Castrovalva? When I say start on it, I don't mean like start on it.
I don't think any of us would do that. It's actually quite a twee little story, I think, Castrovalva. It's suffering a little bit by the fact that it's a regeneration story. And this is the first time where the regeneration sort of pulls focus and becomes sort of front and center of the story, realistically. So a large proportion of the first couple of episodes are spent with us watching the sort of recovery post-regeneration. And then it sort of feels like the story's tacked on the end. As I said, good opening story. I at this stage was very, very sad to see Tom leaving. And, you know, when the episode starts and you've got that first tracking shot that reminds you of what happened at the end of Legopolis, yeah, I can remember watching that and thinking that really is the end of an era. And it did take me time to adjust, I think, at the time to Peter as the Doctor. So it's been interesting going back and looking over season 19. But yeah, it's an average start to the season, I would say.
I thought you were going to say it suffers from the fact that it exists. I thought it was going to be like, if it was Space Pirates, you know, you could justify that it might be better if you could see it. If they said Castrovalva, if it was just the Viewmaster slides and a soundtrack, would we all think it was wonderful?
No, there are other stories in the season that I may say that about, but this one I'm not ready to say it just yet. I'm gonna put the love on the table to start season 19.
You got the love too, James?
Well, I struggle with this story because partly because what Jason has said, that the regeneration takes away from the story. So you've got he's stumbling around the TARDIS. He's doing all sorts of previous Doctor impressions. He's calling people by the wrong names. You know, you've got this. He's literally unraveling Tom's scarf as he goes. You know, I know. It's like, what are you doing? Then you have the Zero Room. Then you have the Zero coffin box thing because it got jettisoned. It's
awful. It's awful.
It's the Master again. You know, it's almost the same plot. And what I find really difficult about this story, it's like, how many sort of plots does the Master actually have? It's like, we sort of get to this point where he sends the TARDIS into the Big Bang, and then they escape, and he's like, oh, you know, I've got another plan that's better than that plan. And you know, then they land on Castrovalva. And, you know, then he's the, you know, Portreeve, and he's got another plan up his sleeve. You know, he's managed to kidnap Adric, and it's really just, it's kind of I have a lot of nostalgia for it, but it's not without its faults. And when you start to look at those faults, you start to realize they're probably a bit bigger than you thought at the time.
I do wonder if the Master's plan is just to bore everyone to death. I mean, what is he actually trying to do? Other than getting Adric excited on a big whatever he's hung him up on, I don't know what he's doing. What is it? What? I'll send them back to the but then he's also put something in the TARDIS database so that they think they can fly it, but then he's just basically luring them to a very sort of dreary sort of gift shop castle to just what? Why? Roger Delgado's master would never have had such a terrible plot, I'm telling you.
It just reminds me, and I know we talked about the charity specials, but you know, Jonathan Pryce's Master, where he's like, it'll be the deadliest revenge of deadliest revengers. And you're just like, oh my God.
I think because the Doctor describes the Zero Room as sort of pinkish grey, doesn't he? And to me, that's this story, pinkish grey into beige. I mean, you have one episode which is just all in the TARDIS, one episode walking through the woods to a castle, and then 2 episodes walking around a castle.
Yeah.
I'm calling it a castle, whatever we're saying it is based on the drawing, all lovely. Do you know, I'd love to be positive about all this, but my word, it makes the Edge of Destruction look under length.
No, it does a little, I suppose. I mean, I'm a bit of a sucker for TARDIS scenes. I love a good TARDIS scene. And actually, this was the time of era. This was the era where pretty much every story had lots of TARDIS scenes in. So you always had TARDIS at the front, TARDIS at the end, TARDIS used as plot points throughout a number of stories, especially in this season. I think the TARDIS even becomes a taxi, it feels like, in one of the stories. I like that whole thing where they are investigating the sort of to get to the Zero Room, and I love it whenever we get lots of corridor scenes in TARDISes. So I'm a little bit nostalgic when it comes to that. But those first 2 episodes are, they're hard work. There are some nice visual cues. James has already said about the visual cues. You know, Peter unpicking Tom's scarf, and you know, slowly but surely as he walks through, he's discarding bits more of the costume to the point where you think he's actually going to physically strip off, it feels like at one point, because he's literally stripping the clothes off as he's going through.
Isn't he using Tegan's lipstick as well at some point? He's just smearing the walls of lipstick.
And it gives us a chance, I think, to see the new Doctor in action, and I can see where the narrative is in this, and I can see why John Nathan Turner was keen to maybe go down this path, because hitherto up until now, the regenerations themselves were very quick. They were over and done with, a little bit of craziness, and then you were pretty much full into the story. And you know, this carries on in future Doctors from here on. Obviously, it's there today, where you know they have an episode of zaniness, but I personally think it draws too much focus. And is probably unnecessary for the length of the amount of it that happens in this story in particular.
Yeah, it sets the 80s precedent, and I think successively, Twin Dilemma really gets it wrong on the misfire of the regeneration, throttle Perry for a few minutes and all that sort of stuff, and then Time the Rani, thinks Kate O'Mara could be Bonnie Langford, all that. It just keeps getting iterations of awfulness on that front. I just think the regeneration, fine, have a bit of trauma. In some ways, we haven't done this one yet. I'm in my mind, think of Planet of the Daleks. You have that opening episode, and Katie is sensational in that, and she carries that episode because she thinks the Doctor's dead or dying, and so he's unconscious, and you know, there's that sort of. It's a great intro to the story. Whereas Castrovalva is just like, oh, I'm having a bad day, my regeneration's failing, I'm having a bad day. And they just wheel him round, and it's just like, do you know, it's just like looking after him, just someone who's got flu or something. It's like, oh, come on, have a lens up and move on.
We aren't going to talk about this. Sorry, Jason.
I was going to say, I think this highlights perfectly well. This story really highlights it, and I think it's on show throughout the rest of this season, mostly. There are too many companions in the TARDIS.
Yeah, this is the first fam, if you like, but it's the dysfunctional fam, because they just don't get on, and we'll probably pick up on this on other stories, but the stories often start with them bickering in the console room, or, you know, having some sort of flouncy strop, and, you know, Adric's leaving the TARDIS, or Tegan's gone off to her room. And in this story, you know, thankfully, I say thankfully, but thankfully, Adric is kidnapped by the Master. So you get, you know, he's not in that trio. You've got the 2 women working together. But when they're together, you know, you've got a doctor who's having this failed regeneration, and, you know, the other two are just sort of flailing around. But you're right, you know, whereas with Katie, with that story, totally just owned it, you know, was capable of functioning. And I find that a struggle with, but in subsequent stories as well, is that the dynamic of the three companions, they don't get on very well. They're a little bit better towards the end, but certainly in the early stories, irritates me, and more so rewatching it recently than I remembered at the time. At the time, it was kind of like, it's the TARDIS crew. Watching this back, I've actually been surprised at how irritated I am with the interactions with them, and, you know, how you know, particularly Adric in some scenes is very selfish. He's very you know, he's just very sort of brattish, you know, and Tegan just flies off at him at the slightest thing, and you're just like, oh, here we go. You know, Nyssa normally blends into the background. She's normally got a book. She's just like doing some science, you know, while these two are having a row. But I find it really, for me, it's kind of off-putting, like you say, Jason.
It's sort of interesting because I think, like with Robot, if you watch Robot, Sarah Jane's Doctor's best mate, and she wants him to get better, and then they want to have adventures together. You get the impression that they're only waiting for him to get better so they can have a bloody good go at him and say, I want to go home, I don't really want to be here, my dad's dead, otherwise I probably wouldn't be here either. But, you know, it's kind of like, oh my God, do any of you want to have this adventure, or are you just sort of here because you've got a bad booking? And I really think that punishes Davison's Doctor, because I would say, it's slightly vaulting ahead to the next season. There is that moment of watching Arc of Infinity where it's just Peter and Sarah together, you know, with Dr. Niven. And it's incredible because you get the impression they want to travel together. You get the impression they're going to have an adventure together, and you've got just the two of them to take the plot. Whereas you've got, I think, even more so than with the first four, because I mean, again, there were four originally, you know, we sort of talk about that. They've all got such strangely finite existences within the setup that it is cluttered, and I just think it does go to the detriment of the stories. I mean, that said, Castrovalva, I mean, I like Derek Waring, I like Shadavan, who does a great turn. I love Paddy Kingsland's music. I mean, that helps a lot of the location walking. Nyssa falling in the water is one of my favourite Twitter GIFs.
Oh, I love the face. She gets the iron bonder out and it's got water in it.
And Nyssa's line, I know so little about telebiogenesis. Don't we all, love? Don't we all? But I don't know. To me, it just feels like porridge, but expensive porridge from an organic shop that you should be enjoying but probably won't.
You just
and feels like it's just a bit too long, like you said. I think you know, there's enough plot to fill 2 episodes. There is not enough plot to fill 4 episodes by a long way.
So has anyone got any last nice points to make about Castro? I think Jen's got stats, hasn't he?
Stato's back. Here he goes. So,
again, something that will probably come up later on in other reviews. This is the start of John Nathan Turner trying to disguise some of the sort of recurring villains. So there's this whole thing that runs through this season of the anagrams for Anthony Ainley. So this was the first one, which was Neil Toynay, because it's supposed to be Tony Ainley. So trying to disguise the fact that the Master was in it. And I think there's a few more like that during the season. And another little fun fact, which I did find quite amusing, the very end scene where they rescue Adric, he's supposed to be looking like he's unwell, and he genuinely was unwell. In fact, so badly, apparently, according to cast members, he was throwing up behind a tree because he'd been drinking Campari the night before and got very drunk. So the scene at the end where he's looking really ill, he actually is ill.
Is that why Jason's looking like this today?
I mean, I'll be honest. If I drank Campari, to be honest with you, I think I'd be behind the tree.
Yeah.
The only one thing I think that I haven't mentioned that I wanted to, again, it comes down to Peter's sort of opening gambit really on this, is that I think the direction he was sort of trying to take this. I think his own record as having said he tried to roll up quite a number of the previous actors into his portrayal of the Doctor. And I do think that they're really quite nice touches, particularly if you look back, and we weren't in an era of being able to watch these episodes, sort of look back at old Doctors. But I do think his little impersonations, his little impersonation cameos of the different Doctors during the first, it's just a nice little touch, and it throws you back and just links you back to the previous Doctors. So I kind of liked that bit. That's got a point. I'm definitely giving a point in this score for that little touch in the opening episode.
Well, it's interesting because I think again that is part of the wider thing, I suppose, that JNT starts to embrace that thing of Doctor Who had always had a heritage, and when it did use its heritage, it wasn't like it was acknowledging it. It was just, we'll bring those monsters back because we've got the costumes, it's going to be cheap. Whereas progressively now, things start to get referenced and it starts to sort of live on its mythology, which it's like that. On one hand, you go, hey, you've mentioned Corporal Bal. On the other hand, you go, oh, do the audience at home need this, or is this appealing to the fan in me rather than it making good? I don't know.
It was the first title sequence where he's listed as the Doctor instead of Doctor Who.
But
end of days. It should be DR Who, shouldn't it?
But I also think this is the sort of start of Nathan Turner trying to make a brand out of Doctor Who, which is not something that had been done previously. So, Doctor Who was a kids program and it's run for many, many years. But John Nathan Turner tried, I think, he was the first, you could almost say the first unofficial brand manager for Doctor Who. And what he tried to do was to market it in such a way that it became its own thing and its own brand. And that's part of why I think some of the decisions that he was making at that time were commercially led rather than necessarily around the drama side of it.
All I'm going to say is the reason they picked Revenge of the Cybermen to be the first VHS over Castrovalva.
And a very good story that is too. And as I recall, a worthy winner of our season 12 poll.
It really was. And are we ready to do some worthy scoring, or I don't know?
Well, I'm not sure it's going to be terribly worthy for this first story, if I'm honest.
So go on, James. Let's hear what score are you giving to the Castrovalva?
Well, I'm afraid some of my scores got jettisoned as we were escaping the Big Bang. and I ended up with a paltry 5.
5? It's all good. Jason?
Okay, so some nice touches in this story. Overly long, as I've said already. Some nice touches. I'll forgive it as it's a regeneration story, but oh my Lord, it's not a great start to the season. And I also have agreed with James on my score here, and it is a 5.
There was no collusion.
There wasn't, absolutely not. There never is, by the way. Let's make that really clear.
There's a WhatsApp group, and as we speak, we're just calculating. Okay, well, as is my wont to go last and throw it all out. Castrovalva to me is one I have never enjoyed because it is bog boring. There is nothing that is drawing me to it. There's no exciting guest star. There's no exciting story. It's just lots of very dreary TARDIS. Nice. I mean, I'd go for a walk to Castrovalva. I mean, it looks lovely. It's a lovely location. I just don't need to see it. So for me, Castrovalva is basically a big non, and I'm going to give it 2.
Yeah, but we are starting low this season,
I'm hungry for the trolling. So Castrovalva, therefore, starts the season with 12 points.
Top of the leaderboard with 12 points.
Top of the leaderboard till the televote. So we roll on desperately to Four To Doomsday. How does it keep getting better? That's what Iceland wanted to know. They hadn't watched season 19. So Who wants to start us on Doctor Who?
I'll start us off. So I literally got written on my pad, lots of squabbling. And I think this was the one where I just realized, oh my God, they're irritating when they're all together. Tegan pushes Adric over at one point.
It's an incredible scene because it's so badly done. This is the worst play school fall and fight I've seen in the show.
She's just like, get out of my way, and just shoves him over.
Could you imagine Sarah Jane lopping Harry one and go, get out of my sight? It's like, oh my God, what are these people?
Although this is not a great story, I'll say this up front. The amount of times I watched, Peter Davison rolling his eyes, just every scene, he's rolling his eyes at the other people, all arguing around them, or telling Adric off, or, going, you stupid boy, and sort of thing. Nyssa, the first scene in the TARDIS he's so patronizing as well, and it just shouts at them. She just shouts at them to shut up. The dynamic between the three of them is really grating.
Is this the one? Because they've slightly merged in my head, and it's literally been a week now. Is this the one where Adric says you should learn how to do maths, and you don't have an opinion this because you're a woman, and it's like it's a really weird sort of, oh blimey.
Which one was that? That might have been this one. You're right. There's one where he says to Tegan about it, and then Nyssa goes,
get a real job, doesn't he? You get a real job, you wouldn't need to be an air hostess or something. He's like, oh, so friendly.
I've written it down somewhere, but it feels like that every episode, though. Every episode seems to start with them having a row in the TARDIS. Just about generally everything.
Every Phantom event starts with me and Dex having a row in the car, so I mean, it thematically works for things, doesn't it?
I mean, the Doctor calls Adric a gullible idiot. He's really condescending.
With love, though.
I've put down here. It just every time Adric is on there, he just seems to be doing something really annoying. He goes along. We haven't really talked about anything else yet, but he goes along with sort of Monarch's plan, doesn't he? He's like, oh, I've got Monarch on my side and all this lot. And it totally being played. The Doctor just keeps coming in and going, what's going on? Oh, Monarch is my best friend. Oh, all right then. Someone say something positive before I carry on.
I would like to say, because this is Peter's first recorded story, isn't it?
Yeah.
I actually quite like, he's a little bit waspish and he plays it a bit older, I think, in this story. There's a tone that's different to, obviously, because of the ordering. I quite like that, because it's the young look, but the old, and it's a shame that they didn't have the confidence to sort of keep rolling with. So I really liked his performance in this as the Doctor. That was a good take on it. I love Annie Lambert. She's lovely. So I feel bad criticizing the story. She's lovely. But what I mean, it's another one of those things where you sort of see, you think, what is the bad guy trying to do here? He's just trying to. He's a very convoluted sort of plan to sort of invade Earth, I think, and shrink people with his.
They've literally
his robots.
Thousands of years in this plan.
It's been years.
Back and forth, and now they're coming back to do the final invasion. And actually, when you think about this, there are very few redeeming features about this story, because actually, this is a story about three frogs wanting to invade Earth.
They've been planning it longer than it takes Jason to score a story as well.
It's just a whole lot of ploddy padding, isn't it? That's all this is. It's a whole lot of ploddy padding. Now, I would wave the Marmite at this point, but I'm actually not sure it's worth it, because I don't know that there's a group of people that like this story. If there are, then I'm going to offend them.
Someone's going to comment to say that they like it.
I agree, but this isn't quite my least favorite story of the season, but this season is quite odd in the way that I have a bottom 5 stories of Doctor Who that I don't really like at all. And there are very few redeeming features about them. And 2 of those 5 sit in this season. And this is the first one, Four To Doomsday. 1 to Doomsday. In fact, what it would have been nice, no need to do anything to Doomsday. Let's just forget this story, scratch it and start again. The only redeeming feature, and there's a couple of reasons why I'll give some points to this story. There's a couple of redeeming features. I'm with Paul on this. Paul Shelley and Annie Lambert are brilliant in their respective roles. They're working with a really weak script. So they're trying their best to bring a performance, and they do. And Stratford Johns, to be perfectly honest with you, I don't think he entirely signed up to being an alien in the way that he thought he was going to be. I mean, this is a great Shakespearean actor we're talking about here, and Stratford Johns is sat there, and he is completely covered in frog-like makeup, which I don't believe he was happy about, if I read the reviews correctly. You know, there's a couple of good things. The spaceship sets are well designed. I think the way that they module and work the sets is brilliant. Anything with Burt Kwok in it is going to get my vote, that's for sure.
Don't you feel sad that Burt you wait all those years for him to come into a Doctor Who, or and it's his only one, and it is such a piss poor part for him. And a terrible story. It's like, on my days, any other season, there must have been an opportunity, and he'd have been. I mean, the sort of potential. Imagine if he'd been the captain in Earthshock instead of Beryl Reid or something. I mean, it's the same with Stratford Johns. There are so many other parts along the way this season.
Hang on. I can't imagine Earthshock without Beryl Reid.
Let's hold our power on that one.
But in terms of, honestly, Burke, I agree, incredible to see Burke, a legend. But what he's not even. What's the point of that part? It's just awful.
It could have been anybody playing it, couldn't it?
And Stratford Johns again. You give someone. I mean, imagine again. I love the portrayal in Visitation. But I mean, he could have played Richard Mason. Imagine how that would have rolled. It just seems like they had certain names booked. We've got these big guest stars, assign one per story, and if they end up with Four To Doomsday, then they've lucked out. It's fine.
It wasn't a good story for them. And oh my Lord, what? I mean, I used to watch Crossroads back in the 70s, and every now and again they pad out scenes with Nolly singing. And this is a bit like that in this story. Every now and again, we get about 200 hours of choreographed things going on.
The dragons.
What is going on there? It's awful.
And Tegan speaks a very specific dialect of Aboriginal. Thank goodness. I mean, what are the chances? and that glorious moment where they, can you pass me the sodium chloride? That's salt, kids. You've learned something new today. Oh, it's awful.
And then she tries to escape in the TARDIS and manages to just move it.
Which again is that seems to be a running theme in this season that they sort of explaining Castrovalva that the Masters had a little tinker with the knobs and all the Madrix has done something, and that's why. But Tegan just rocks in and she's like, I'm going to do this. And then time flight, the flight attendant's like, I can fly Concorde, I can fly the TARDIS. Yeah.
It does seem to be that anybody can fly the TARDIS in this season. It is utterly ridiculous.
Unless it's like an auto, there's like an auto option on it. You can just sort of put it into, take it out of manual.
Interestingly, the console. Interestingly, the console changed so many times in this season as well. It's not the same in any story. It's changed because there are so many little plot points in every story that require bits to be bolted on to the console, like the keyboard that comes up and the data bank and some other things that they need. It's awful. They are really ripping that proper part pretty much every story and almost rebuilding it feels like, for the special effects.
Bring back the fast return switch on the masking tape. That's what I say.
I love the fast return switch. That's my new most favorite thing.
But you do get that scene where, you know, the Doctor's floating around in space. He's run out of steam, and so he throws the cricket ball.
Which it's a cringe thing, but I think it's quite well done. I think the effect itself isn't badly done. But
it is. When I remember when I first saw that as a kid, I was like, wow. And now I watch it as an adult, I'm like, oh, it's kind of, it's like, okay.
I mean, I'm slightly feeling we need to push on to another story because the positivity is just a little bit lackluster for the opening here. I mean, how many people turned over to watch Crossroads or Emmerdale or whatever was on ITV? We don't know.
I will just say, I was just going to add on the back end of this, because it will feed into the next story a bit later on, that actually at this point they were supposed to be writing Nyssa out. So this was supposed to be Nyssa's departure was supposed to be at the end of this episode, but Peter wanted her kept in.
Wow, didn't know that. That is
so
that. They
were going to shave, knock the TARDIS team back down. But
yeah, I think Peter wanted Sarah, John wanted Janet. Spelt the end, really, I suppose.
I do quite like the way that the stories segue in this season, though. That is one positive I've got. So the stories sort of seem to tail in and have a cliffhanger or some kind of feed into the following story. So at the end of this one, there's a feed into the next story, and likewise at the end of Castrovalva coming into this one, there was a feed. So whilst they don't altogether make a huge amount of sense at the time, it's kind of nice the way I think they're trying to bridge all the stories together by having these little outros and intros. So there's a positive to end on.
Yeah.
But Nyssa does literally go, oh, I feel ill, and down she goes. Bam, she's down.
She must have done that after she read the first two scripts. She just went, oh,
they've kept me on. Oh, I've got another season. Oh.
Like a Jane Austen heroine, it's just because she's a bit tired. There is nothing else to it. There's no story arc to it. She's just a bit tired. I can understand it after 4 weeks of the Four To Doomsday. So, are we going to go for a score on this?
Yes.
Yeah.
Who wants to go first?
I don't mind going first this time, actually. So I'm trying to come up with a summary for this, but I'm really struggling. Bankans, Monopticons, and a whole lot of ploddy padding. It's in my bottom 5 Doctor Who stories of all time, this one, unfortunately, for a number of reasons. There are a couple of redeeming features. So as I already said, I think Persuasion and Enlightenment are great characters. Having Burt Kwok it's great, but those things are not making up for something that's really, really, really not very good. So I'm afraid I've only got a score of 1.5 for Four To Doomsday.
1.5. We've gone fractional early.
I have, to try and cover the fact that it was going to be a 1 otherwise.
James, are you going to be the voice of reason and the shining star in this situation?
I'm going to be slightly higher than Jason, because although I have been very critical of it, but there are some bits that I do like. I think Stafford Johns is actually okay. I know he didn't particularly like the part, but I thought he was quite, he's quite evil as Monarch. So the oxygen deprivation and things like that. So, but it wasn't enough really to get it above a 4. So 4 To Doomsday, 4.
4 To Doomsday gets a 4. Recursive occlusion has set in here. It's another 2 for 4 To Doomsday. There's very little reason I think I put it on for anything. It's when I'm, I think I'm not familiar, and then I switch it on again, like, oh, I know why I don't watch this. I know why I don't put myself through this again. Sorry, it's another 2, which gives 4 To Doomsday 7.5.
Oh dear. I mean, it is such a shame with the cast list that was in it. It's a shame that it's so low, but it's just the story that lets it down.
Which means that Castrovalva is still top of the leaderboard.
Still top of the leaderboard. I mean, I don't know. I mean, let's hope the next story we move on to is a little less. Let's head to Kinder. Would you like to start us on the Kinder, Jason?
I'm still open-mouthed, wide-mouthed. Have you got a Marmite mug?
Yes, we bought it as a special gift for you, but you haven't visited since, so we thought, sod you, let's use it on the cam and wind you up.
Okay, well, I'm now feeling very left out here. Okay, Kinder, a story I've approached the rewatch on with some intrepidation, because for me, I hadn't watched this in quite some time, and my memory of it was such that I think I originally found it to be quite a muddled story. So I've approached this rewatch and taken the opportunity to go in with a fresh pair of eyes. And in actual fact, Diva Loca, the Mara, and some lovely giant wind chimes. It's a great little story, this one. I still find it slightly confusing in parts. And I think some of the studio production work rather somewhat lets it down. However, this was definitely a step up on the first two stories of the season, and one that I've enjoyed the opportunity to reevaluate for us to talk about during today's Talking About.
Ooh.
Ica. I think my first and most positive point about the whole thing, Simon Rouse, I think, gives one of the best Doctor Who guest star performances. I think he's incredible in progression and the descent into madness and the shades and all that. I think he's incredible. I mean, it's quite something when you pull him out as the star performance in that, when actually, you know, you've got Richard Todd, also incredible. Mary Morris, who I swear, when I first saw Mary Morris, I thought it was animatronic. And I don't mean that in a horrible way, but I genuinely thought she might be like a Jim Henson thing.
I can't believe you said that, because Jason will know, because he's wounded me up about this before. That is exactly what I thought. I thought when I first saw the DVD, like the video cover, I thought it was a Jim Henson puppet.
Yes, because I hadn't seen the actual evidence, and so I saw the pictures, and she's like, I thought that's a great puppet. I loved that. Yes. Sorry, Mary Morris. But someone who's not a puppet, and again, it's just, I'm not going to be unkind to the regulars, but my word, Nerys Hughes, I love you as a companion. Please just stop on. Please just come, because she got she's like the Doctor's equal, and there's a bit of spice there, and there's lots of little interplay. I love the bit where it's like left or right, and he goes left, she goes right, and then off they go. She's so incredible with it, because sometimes that sort of casting can go both ways. But Nerys, I think, you know, Jason's pride and joy, national pride. Incredible.
I loves Nerys, I do. Loves her.
The first, just the little bit parts of the opening, Jeff Stewart, that is incredibly creepy. He does a great turn, you know, with Tegan's mind and the Mara and all that stuff. The legendary Anna Wing. It's so many great people giving great performances, and Sarah Prince as the young girl of the tribe. Quite often, kids, if you're not careful, you end up with the Conrad twins, and it's like, oh, can we actually kidnap them now? She's great because she's obviously younger, and she's a good performance in that as well. I mean, even like the like Adrian Mills has to do a lot of kind of mime acting and stuff. There's a great turn from him. Lots of great performances. I do. And again, I'm accentuating the positives here, because I think there's a lot of great performances. I like the story, but I don't love the story, because again, I don't.
It's very erratic. It's very erratic, I think, the story. The storytelling is disjointed. And it's... Stop waving that Marmite mug at me, honestly. That's not... I've really got to get one of those now I've seen that.
What I...
Oh, look, honestly. I just have to make do with the real thing, but I'm not waving it for this story.
Don't wave your Marmite.
The storytelling, the storylining in this is just erratic for me. I think it's disjointed, and I think the dream sequences, they jar quite heavily. And actually, I'm not enjoying, or didn't enjoy so much, the colonial subtext either. It really jars against the story. And again, I just think it's probably just a poor production choice to have gone down that route. But Yeah, great cast list. It's a shame. It's a shame the story, I think, just falls a little bit flat for me.
No. I'm gonna jump in here because you've stolen almost all of my points about the cast. So let me talk about the story. I'm going to be very honest. This is one of my top 5 stories, and I'll explain to you why. Because this is one of those rare Doctor Who stories that has more to it than just the actual story. So there's a whole thing. If you look at all the characters' names, for example, they're all from Buddhism. They're all different parts of Buddhism. So you've got Anika, which is it's instability. You've got Anatta, which means soul or non-self. You've got Dukkha, which means suffering. All of the different cast members, even in the dream sequences, are all characters from Buddhism. And the bit where Claire Wing is playing chess with, I can't remember his name, but that scene is supposed to be around how Tegan feels on board the TARDIS with Adric and Nista, that she's an outcast because they're the two sciencey brainy ones, and she doesn't connect with them. Every time I watch Kinder, I spot something different, and you're right, there are really powerful. I mean, Simon Rouse is just amazing as he becomes more and more unhinged through the episode, and you see the tiny things he does first. You know, he's obsessed with cleaning and things like that, and then he gets worse and worse. But there is it's based on a book that was out in 1976 called The Word for World is Forest, and there's lots of deeper meanings to this story, which is why I love it so much. The cast are brilliant. I love the chemistry between Nerys Hughes and Peter Davison. It's the first time I think I've ever seen the Doctor sort of genuinely warm to someone in almost an affectionate way. The two of them are so good together. You've got, even Adric, who's annoying, isn't as bad because he's part of it, but you can kind of forgive that. But there's just so many different underlying things. So, and when you're right, I did think she was animatronic for years. I thought she was animatronic when I watched it. I had to look her up because people were like, she's a real lady, But when she passed away and her intelligence, her knowledge got passed on to the young girl, there was just so much going on in this story.
But do you not think, James, that the storytelling in this one, imagine the audience it's aimed at back when it was first aired. You've looked at it and you've watched it, you've seen new things each time. But do you not think the story to be slightly complicated? I
think
with the dream sequences.
I think the first time I watched it when I was younger, I obviously didn't pick up on any of the references to all the different Buddhism sort of things as they go through. Didn't necessarily pick up on the thing about the two chess players. I thought it was a weird story in the fact that there's no, apart from the Mara, who doesn't really sort of appear, and it's just the tattoo and doesn't sort of appear until a bit later on, that it was a bit odd. But there's like you said, there's enough strong performances to carry that through from my younger self. But as an older person, and with a knowledge of where the story comes from and some of the meanings of some of the things, I just find that fascinating. And I think sometimes Doctor Who does that and doesn't do it very well. There are some stories where they try and make it more, complex. Something like Ghostlight, which I know we've talked about before. Some people love it. Some people are just like, I don't get the whole thing. It's trying to be overly complicated, or But for me, Kinder is one of those stories I can watch again and again and again, and I'll see something different each time.
It's great though, isn't it? Because actually, I think this really does go to show, I think, how diverse we all are as fans. And I think it's interesting that our opinions can be quite so diverse when we're in these videos as well.
I love Tegan when she's sort of trapped in her own mind. You know, the torture she goes through, where there's suddenly loads of Tegans, and you know, I just think that's it's I know, but it's so well done. She you know, I think she's so good in that scene, whereas lots of other scenes up until this point, you know, we've had the kids bickering basically. Nyssa obviously wasn't supposed to be part of this story, so she's asleep in the TARDIS for the whole thing, because this was where she was supposed to be written out, so she's not in the story. You know, but I like the fact that Tegan's given something more to do. You know, that whole thing, and of course then that gets referenced later on as well about, you know, her experiences. But yeah, I love it.
Oh, that was a Kinder surprise. That was.
There we go.
I think we know where the score's going to be there then when we get to the end of this.
Yeah, type up my contrary points then. Yeah, I don't know. I'd still slightly say that I prefer Snake Dance over Kinder, but awkward. No, yeah, I do. I like Kinder. I think it's fine. For me, I get that there are multi levels that you can watch it on. I suppose it's a bit like a Kate Bush album or something, isn't it? Some people like to look for the intricate levels. Some people just want to get drunk and wave their arms to Wuthering Heights. It depends what you want to take away from it, isn't it? Really.
Watch me at Utopia. Don't put Wuthering Heights on. I'll look like a shirt on a washing line.
Oh, just don't put Kate Bush on, full stop. But
you be careful waving that star around there. That's a bit dangerous. You'll have someone's eye out with that if you're not careful.
It's bigger than Adrix. Kill a couple of Cybermen with that one. Right. Well, are we going to go towards wheel turns? Scores are given.
Yes. Very good.
Thank you. I don't know whether Jason's going to pass away to Rusty behind him, and Rusty will say, "Idiot, here are my scores." No. Say, look, I have watched it, people. Okay, who wants to go first?
I'll go first, because it will be no surprise to anybody watching to know that this scores a 10 from me.
It's a very solid 10, simple 10, like that, James.
Yep, absolutely.
What was the build-up and the pizzazz?
Got Jason for that.
This is true. You could have the Mary Morris sort of Oriental hat, couldn't he? I suppose you haven't got an apple, Jason. You could have an apple prop, couldn't you? You could have done the Neris Hughes.
I could have. I just haven't had time to get stuff together before.
He's going to take his shirt off and have the thing, Aris.
The world is not ready. I will not have an Aris body underneath here. I can assure you of that.
We don't need to see your Aris.
No, we don't. What you do need is a score from me, though, I'm sure. It's interesting, as I said, I think I said just a few minutes ago, it's interesting we're all diverse in the way that we look at Doctor Who, and we all look for different things. And whilst this is on the surface, it's a good contribution to the history of Doctor Who, but it's not an outright classic for me. It's certainly, I'm not going to be where you are on the scores on this one, James. There's a lot of good things going for it, particularly the guest cast list. I'm going to feel like a not we now, I know. So, this is going to rule me. I'm going to be a not we, but it's the storylining in this, and it's just a bit too erratic for me. And I think there's too many levels. I like my Doctor Who stories to be quite simple in their approach. So for me, the score I'm going to give Kinder is 7.
7 points. So I think I don't like to agree with Jason on too many things if I have to. I get, and I suppose it's a little bit like other stories. I can understand why people like them. I can understand, like a fine wine, why you'd take good notes on something. But for me, you know, I don't adore it, but I know it's, you know, good. It's just, again, it's probably not a go-to situation for me. So I scored Kinder 6, which is it's quite a vault up on the standards we've had so far, which puts Kinder into pole position with 23 points.
But will it be enough to take the season?
Not with the series finale. So we are going to, like Kylie Ann Minogue, step back in time now to the Visitation.
Hey! And again, a nice little story, this one. Out comes the Marmite mug that you can't see because he's quiet on the other end of this. It's amazing when you're trying to give your comments and all I can see is him waving his mug around in the background. 100 shooting stars that never bode well for the future. We're Heathrow bound, but it's 1666 and not the present day. And it's actually quite interesting because we get to get a glimpse behind who actually started the Great Fire of London. Costume dramas for me at the BBC have always been held in high regard, and they always put a good period piece on, definitely in the costuming department. But this has got a bit of everything for everyone, I think, in this story. It's well written, it's well directed. You've got a nice mix of not being entirely bound in the studio, so you've got a nice bit of location work, some nice film work at the end with the Fire of London stuff. And I personally think Michael Robbins is absolutely sublime as Richard Mace. So there is such a lot going for this story. If you consider where we started the season to where we are now, this for me is quite possibly one of the highlights of the season.
I like it because it's I'm not going to use Jason's S word, but it's a very strong it is just solid. It is. Eric has done a very basic sort of. It's an alien land. Blah, 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 blah. It's a very linear thing. It's not trying to be too clever with anything. And I kind of like the fact it's refreshing because it just tells the story and it has a sort of beginning and a middle and an end, and it does that journey. And I watching this season in order to get to this point where it's like, crikey, this is our spearhead from space. If this had been the first one with Peter in, it'd have been like, this would have been so much better, because fine, do experiment. You should always experiment, do different things, exciting things. But there's something about launching a Doctor with a very, regular, your boot cut gene, just do it. Just do it like this. And that's what this is. I think the biggest applaud I do love Michael Robbins, but I'd say Michael Melia, underneath all that, gives an incredible pterodactyl. I mean, there's personality, there's levels in that, which, I mean, it's quite gross makeup in a lot of ways. It is well done, but under all that, to give a performance, I'd say, amazing for Michael's performance. James doesn't look convinced by all this.
No, he's not, is he, by any stretch?
I'm still on my high from Kinder, and now we've come down slightly for me, so I'm the other way around. But there are some things that I really do like about this, and the performances you've called out already. I think it is a straightforward story. It's where it takes you in the end is really good. You've got Fred Elliott makes a sort of appearance at the beginning, before he gets dispatched. It's the same thing in the beginning. We've got the tantrum in the TARDIS. This is not Heathrow. Tegan throws a strop. Adric doesn't think that Tegan likes him, but there's a lovely scene where he says to the Doctor about it, and the Doctor just says, humanoids hide their feelings, which there's that nice little moment with them. A bit later on, Adric, Matthew Waterhouse has obviously been to the Carol Ann Ford school of tripping over, being able to just twist an ankle on nothing, just like a few steps and whoops, I'm off. But it's that, I don't dislike this story. It's enjoyable. I can sit and watch it quite happily. I think that, like you say, the performance as the Pterodactyl is really, really good. The scenes, I mean, those things on their wrists, though, I mean, they're massive. It's just like these huge, great big crystals that they're taking over. There's a few bits and pieces. I think This is better served for all of the cast members because they all get something to do through this story as well. So I think it's much more organised than, say, Castrovalva, where they're, you know, bickering and you're kind of like, all you're really doing is wheeling the Doctor in a box to a castle. So I like that aspect of it. Yeah, I don't dislike it. It's you know, it's a good story.
The put downs are better, aren't they? A broken clock keeps better time than you. At least it's accurate 2 times a day. And when they're trying to land the TARDIS, Mr. Anadric, and go, what was the Doctor doing? You'll probably get angry. I said empathise, not be silly. I like you know, they're kind of, they're spikier rather than just being either, you know. It is a bit awkward having that kind of start the story with an argument because they don't want to be there sort of thing. But I think again, Eric, he knows to split them up and he knows to divide them up and to give them sort of subplots. I mean, one thing I do think was actually unintentionally hilarious is that you do get the scene when Nissa's making the sort of the android destroy machine, and she huffs it all the way from the console room along the corridor to her bedroom and then sits on the bed. It's like, did we need to see her dragging it the whole way? Could we have seen the start, the end? What do we get from that?
And could I just ask, what was that for as well? She spent 3 episodes building it just to destroy
the android, to make it shake apart. That's what it was. And then the Doctor walks in and goes, look at the mess you've made. It's kind of like...
She's a bit groggy. She's had a few episodes sleep. Give her a break.
It did feel like we need to give the companion something to do here, so we'll let Nissa build this thing for 3 episodes in the TARDIS away from everybody. I know it's been a little bit facetious. Eric's script is sharp here. It's his first contribution to the series. Obviously, he was soon to become script editor, and you know, ultimately, I think he put his credentials on the table here fairly loudly and said, this is how I'm going to deal with these kind of stories. And I think he did it well. He serviced the Doctor well. The script references the companions quite well. And it's a good, intelligent story, as Paul's already said, with a good start, middle, end. Nice, simple Doctor Who, just how I like it. So, you know, compared to Kinder, where I think that the plotting is slightly complex, this is far from it. There are just some nice little touches throughout. And I do think the way that they handle the fire at the end as well, it would have been a bit of a surprise to us. I don't think we were seeing it coming at the time. But the way that they stage it and they leave you with that little lingering doubt that was it this that could have started the Great Fire of London, I just think it's just nicely underplayed. It's not absolutely shoehorned in and whacked across the entire story. It's just a nice little sign off at the end.
Although you do see Tegan's aggression when she starts belting 7 ends of shit out of the pterodactyl at the end in the barn. She goes for him, doesn't she? And then they're like, oh, let's try and save them. It's like, she's just giving them a brain hemorrhage and now you want to save them. I think you're a bit late there. I don't think anyway, maybe that's her anger management coming through. Too much. Interesting. I'm going to do my little stato fact here for everybody in the world. Michael Robbins was very nearly Michael Craze.
Oh, really?
Yeah. John's initial idea coming into doing it was that he would have an old companion back each season. I mean, we could have had Jackie Lane as the captain in Earthshock, but he actually, he didn't think it had worked out particularly well with Jacqueline Hill coming back for Meglos. Brutal. So he changed his mind because apparently Michael Craze was what he was earmarking the part for.
Wow. Okay, didn't realise that. I mean, Michael Robbins does deliver a good performance. He's actually over the years been quite an underused actor, I think, in many things. Yeah,
some people do really go for him on this. I think the cast do. I think I've seen a few sort of things where members of the cast have gone, look, what is he doing? What's the performance? But it is a colour. You can't underdo that performance. You've sort of got to take it a bit bigger because if you, it's a colourful guest part, isn't it? You've got to go big.
He stands out in that role for sure, no questions.
Yeah,
and I like the android dress. I mean, some of these things are a bit sort of Antonioni, but I like the android dressing up as Death. That's quite iconic. I like the look of that. That's all good. It's a great. I mean, I'd be surprised if it's anyone's like favourite story. I'd be very surprised if anyone's like, Visitation is the peak of Doctor Who, for me, the best thing I've ever seen. But by the same sort of wheel, I'd be very surprised if anyone really didn't like the Visitation.
Yeah. It's one you could show someone who doesn't know much about Doctor Who without having to explain loads of backstory, loads of, it's a self-contained story. Like Jason says, it's not complex.
It's not complex. I think for me, the only thing that I questioned after I finished watching the story this time round was, whilst I agree with the performance of Mark Amelia from the pteroleptal point of view, I do question the pteroleptals as an alien menace, and I just wonder whether or not we'd have been better getting a returning monster here rather than something new, because actually, in some respects, I'm not entirely sure pteroleptals as an alien race have stuck with me, if you can see where I'm coming from on that.
Oh, if you watched The Awakening. No, he hasn't watched The Awakening. You get a reference.
I have watched The Awakening. Hang on. We're not talking about that, though, today, are we?
But the pteroleptals are mentioned in The Awakening, is what I'm saying here.
All I'm saying is, for me, would I have brought back, I'd have been tempted, I think, in this instance, I suppose I'm trying to say, I'd have been tempted to have potentially brought a monster back, something, I mean, appreciate not the Ice Warriors, because it's the Great Fire of London, but it might have been great to have had Ice Warriors or something here, I think.
I know, but on the costumes, and I could be doing out a limb of inaccuracy, aren't they designed based on what Elizabethan, obviously not quite Elizabethan, it's just slightly post, sailors say they saw mystical creatures, and that's the design for them, I think. I like the terrors. I think it's a shame that actually you just get the reference later, that you don't get them back for another story. They're a nice design, and I quite like their sort of their ethic. And the handy thing of burying your spaceship a little bit so that you don't have to build all of it. I like that. That's always a handy kind of, you can do a very impressive doorway, but the rest of the spaceship shall not be seen. Although the cruelty of the Blu-ray and quite a big television means that when they do go into that and the arrows fly through, you can see the fabric backdrop sort of blowing in the breeze a little bit. So it's like, whoa, it's fine. Nobody was seeing that in 1982.
It lacked the eye of Axos. Axons did it better.
Axons did it better. They ended up on your wall.
They did indeed, yes.
Lee said against Jason's wall, they're better. Are we looking for any scores on the doors of the Visitation?
I feel ready to score.
Okay. Which of you ladies would like to go first?
I'll go first, if you like.
It's like Destiny of the Daleks.
I'll go first.
Go on, my villain leader.
So I've already said, I think this is a good, solid Doctor Who contribution. Eric's script is great, very pacey, some good guest casting in this. The regulars are on form, and I think the twist at the end's a little bit special. So with all that under consideration, the Visitation gets a very solid 8 from me.
Ooh.
You don't feel hate, he's given an 8.
I love it.
James, where are you at on the visit?
Well, by that definition, I'm not quite in kinder heaven, so I gave it 7.
Oh, Pam Ayres would be so proud of us. She would be so proud. Yeah, I like the Visitation. I love a little bit of sort of your Civil War kind of. I love that sort of period. I love all that, that's the word I'm fumbling for and losing. Because obviously not long after, BBC did Sword Divided, so they're obviously inspired by the Visitation. Clearly. I like it. I mean, it's not my favourite story. I prefer it to the last story. It's not, it's not all-time classic, but it's a really good story. And if someone said, I want to watch a Doctor Who, what would you show? What Fifth Doctor story would you show? I think this is a good choice because it's actually a solid story. So I'm also in heaven, and I've given it a 7. Hey, look, things are perking up. Which gives Visitation, not quite enough to take the lead. It gives it 22 overall, so still behind Kinder. But if people are going to give contrary points out, that's what's going to happen to the rankings, I'm afraid. So to recap for the end of part one, languishing at the bottom of the pile is Four To Doomsday with 7.5. It might be accruing more points, but very slowly. It might just be going back and forth and back and forth.
I think I'd almost rather 2 episodes of The Reign of Terror to come back than have to sit through that again.
Exchange and mark for poor Doctor Who stories.
Yeah.
Castrovalva's in third with 12. Visitation second on 22. And Kinder is currently top of the table with 23.
Yes.
So, stay tuned. Come back for part 2. Tell us what you think so far. Be nice. And we'll be back.